As we enter into the new decade, Raiders, elections, and plenty of traffic are expected to dominate headlines. We're peeking into our crystal ball today on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, and additional supporting sponsors.
2020 is expected to be a banner year for Southern Nevada. The Raiders' move this fall will bring fans and a lot of money to town, but also a lot of traffic. California, Nevada may be closer than ever before. A look into the high-speed train that could be approved this year. Plus, presidential candidates are making their pitches before Nevada's voters go to the polls. Now, to explore these stories, plus other headlines that may be coming your way, we're joined by Hugh Jackson, editor of the Nevada Current, Miranda Wilson, reporter at the Las Vegas Sun, Ed Commenda, reporter at the Reno Gazette-Journal and USA Today Network, and Mick Akers, transportation reporter at the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We just finished last episode talking about some of the big stories of 2019. Now we're going to talk about 2020 and some of the big stories we might see in the future. On the last show, we talked about homeless ordinances. We talked about the Raiders. We talked about transportation and, of course, the upcoming campaigns and elections as well. Mick, let's start with the Raiders. What are some of the big stories or some of the areas that you were really interested in covering over the next year?
Yeah, just the completion of the stadium, obviously, and their headquarters out in Henderson. Those are both progressing along pretty good. Been out to both of them within the last month. Just seeing how much they're progressing. Even, like inside, you don't see like the inside when you're driving by, but when you get inside, it's pretty cool looking in there. Obviously, the stadium's going to be a big driver of events here, not just football. So just seeing what kind of events get booked for the stadium as well is going to be pretty interesting to watch the next few months or so. Those will start rolling out here. Yeah. Just the Henderson headquarters is supposed to have like a community aspect to it as well. So they want to bring in some community events and some along those lines, maybe some high school football games and all that, just to see where that falls in with what they're saying. Obviously, that rings true. And as I understand it, that's kind of a step aside from what other NFL franchises have done related to their headquarters. Is that true? Are they looking more at a community aspect to it than other franchises have in the past? Yeah, it's supposed to be more open, more access where players are at. They're going to have security measures in place. Obviously, some fanatics don't go in there and do something crazy, but so they'll be within arm's distance of players. When they're practicing, they can go right up to the door and look outside in the indoor practice field and see the guys in there just getting ready for Sunday. So it's a little bit more open for the average fan. They're going to have a store inside there as well, a Raider store. You can come in and get your merchandise and all that, but they want it to be more of a public place, not just the Raiders. They want it to be like a Henderson, hotspot. Now, the Golden Knights have done a really good job of including the community in a lot of what they are doing as well. Is Raiders kind of following that model? They've seen the success there? Or is this something they've brought in themselves and said, this is really what we want to do to kind of ingratiate ourselves in the Las Vegas community? Probably a little bit of both. Just seeing, with the Golden Knights practice facility in Summerlin, it's really open. Fans can go there and it's packed usually for their practices. I'm sure seeing that success and how the fans have rallied around them kind of played into it. And coming into a new market, with some of the animosity with the money they're getting from the state, I'm sure they want to kind of try to downplay that and bring the fans in and say, hey, we're not just a football team, we're more than that to the community. They've already been doing a lot of charity work within Las Vegas over the last year since they announced they're coming here. So they've been trying to make their footprint here in town before they get here, and I think that's a pretty good idea. Just getting them ready for the Raiders to be here in 2020. Ed, what are some of the big stories you're looking forward to here when the Raiders come to town?
Well, I'll just tell you a little anecdote. I moved back to Nevada in April. And I got into a new apartment in June. It was actually the same apartment complex I lived in the last time I lived in Nevada, like 6 years ago. Guess what? The rent went up a lot. 2-bedroom apartment, $1,400. One bedroom's $1,100. And I was talking with the woman behind the counter, and why is the rent going up? And she says, oh, we got a hockey team now, plus the Raiders are coming. One of the things that I am looking to do is to identify those indicators that the Raiders are here. And I think that rent is going to be one thing that could be impacted. We talked about traffic, but I'm really curious, when a snowstorm comes to a town in the Midwest, you call the hardware store to see if they're out of shovels and generators. What's going to happen when the Raiders come here? I mean, this is a team that's bringing a lot of money, also a reputation. The Raiders, in certain parts of history, have been known as a rowdy team. How is that going to translate to Southern Nevada? We already have the Knights. That was like it was a golden story. It was quite something to see. What's going to happen when the Raiders come here in terms of affordable housing, traffic, things like that. So what are those indicators?
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at.
Are you tracking any other indicators? You mentioned traffic. Yeah, we're talking potentially about huge economic boons here.
Yeah.
Anything else you think? And you hit on an interesting topic there, just on the culture of Las Vegas and how potentially that could shift, positive or negative, related to us identifying with professional teams.
Absolutely. So Las Vegas is a city of spectacle. We do it better than anyone else. You go to a Las Vegas Golden Knights game, it's unlike any hockey game in the world. You go to a Runnin' Rebels game, there's fireworks inside the College Stadium. It's pretty wild. And the thing about reporting is sometimes you got to do a lot of reporting to get to the real stuff. I talk to realtors in the area, and they tell me, "Oh, this is a great thing." Well, it's a great thing for you, because maybe you're going to get a little bit more dough out of this exchange here, this introduction. But how is it going to impact people that are already struggling to live here?
Well, and there's a school of thought, if I may.
Yep.
I mean, we've talked to some folks and interviewed some folks at the Current about this issue of the connection between real estate and rent and the Raiders. And for instance, the UNLV, the Lead Institute, folks over there say, really, there is no concrete connection between this football team and what is happening with housing prices. Now, there are a lot of real estate agents around town who love this narrative. Oh, the Raiders, yes, that's why the prices are so high, but it just means that your home's value is going to go up. So, they love this narrative.
Yeah, they do.
But whether there, in fact, is any there or not remains to be seen. And again, in looking at the stadium going forward, there are a lot of different angles that a lot of, that you folks have pointed out. But one angle that's going to be really fun to watch is to see if, in fact, the room tax makes enough money to cover the interest payments and such that it's supposed to. And if it doesn't, what happens? And whether we are, in fact, going to get tens of thousands of people coming from out of town, the visitors team, more than any other football stadium in the history of ever. That's what the projection is. And this thing doesn't pencil out unless that happens. Stacking up the reality of the economic performance to the projections and promises that have been made about this stadium is going to be, from my standpoint anyway, the most interesting and funnest part of watching this thing come together. I'm typically optimistic about things, but I have to confess I was never a fan of $750 million public subsidy for a football team to begin with. It was the largest in the nation. It's unprecedented. I remember, I'm old enough to remember when Las Vegas took other people for a ride instead of Las Vegas getting taken for a ride, and I fear that is what has happened here.
And let's talk more about the affordable housing aspect of it, whether it's the Raiders or whether it's not. Miranda, this is something you've covered also, as we see a continuing gap here on how much our residents are being paid and what rent is and what our housing prices are. When we're looking forward in 2020, does it look like this gap could potentially close, or are we looking like this might widen?
I don't think it's going to close, and one of the reasons for that is because we don't have a legislative session this coming year. We only have it every 2 years, unlike the majority of states in the country. And cities and towns and counties are not really able to pass there are a lot of policies that they're not able to pass without going through the legislative session. So this past year, there was a bill that was proposed by a former councilman, Bob Coffin, on the city council, and it would have created a sewer surcharge, a surcharge fee in sewer fees, and that money would have been used to create an affordable housing fund for the city of Las Vegas. What ended up happening was, which the Current covered quite well, the legislatures decided to turn this bill into something completely different and create a working group to address homelessness regionally and affordable housing issues regionally. And I think that was a little bit of a blow to the city of Las Vegas, which was trying to actually do something about affordable housing. And in a similar vein, they're also not able to do things like inclusionary zoning or rent control or anything like that without also going to the legislature. So I think we're probably going to continue on the path we're going right now, which is, as has been mentioned, I think a lot of us know just anecdotally, certainly, that rents are rising. And right now we don't have a whole lot of tools for building more affordable housing at our fingertips.
And some of the frustrations you mentioned, of course, have led to the homeless ordinance that went through also. And of course, one of the pinch points being that there isn't enough housing, transitional or permanent housing. Ed, when we're looking forward at the homeless ordinance now, that it's not supposed to take effect until February, at that stage, what are some of the big areas you're looking at potentially covering once that ordinance is in place?
Well, you mentioned it. Is there enough housing to help this issue, to keep people out of jail? The implementation of that ordinance is going to be something I'm going to look out for. One of the things that I think is worth noting is the historical context of the homeless ordinance. This is nothing real new in Las Vegas. If you look at the time that Oscar Goodman was mayor, I mean, he's in front of television cameras saying that Salt Lake City's busing homeless people in based on a source he talked to. Turns out that that wasn't true. He had to apologize. Vegas has been known as kind of this rough and tumble town when it comes to treating the homeless. Carolyn's in now, Mayor Carolyn Goodman's in, and she seems a little more public conscious in terms of how she talks about this issue. But she lives in the same house as Oscar Goodman, and I talk with her a little bit about this, and she always jokes, you know, Oscar's his own character, he has his own personality. He said most of that stuff for, you know, the newspapers. So I'm really curious what the next chapter or the next evolution of this ordinance is. But one of my favorite things to do is to look at the old newspaper stories and to see how far we've come. One thing that I could say is that the number of homeless in Southern Nevada isn't the highest it's been in the last 2 decades. That number actually has decreased if the reporting from the Associated Press, and there was a lot of national stories written about this, if those were true. So I'm curious to see how they're actually going to implement this. So.
You've been around for a while and covered, I think, a lot of the Goodman era here. The ordinance was a bold move, and there's been other city ordinances that are equally as bold in 2019. The domestic violence ordinance I'm talking about here, that is trying to, or not trying to, but is subverting jury trials for those that are accused of domestic violence because of a gun provision that the Nevada Supreme Court upheld. You know, bold ordinances in the past. Have they, you know, what's been some of their outcomes here?
Well, I don't know if the outcomes, when I think of that, I also think of the structure and the foundation of why they're passed in the first place. And for instance, the thing about the case with not charging, I'm sorry, what was the...
Domestic violence?
Yes, the domestic violence.
Yep.
Yeah, what that boils down to is the city of Las Vegas can't afford to run a court system, to have an actual court system with dockets that people can sit in and seat juries and things. So they're not going to be grown up on that score because they say they can't afford it, and so they opt for these kind of circumventions. With the homeless ordinance and the homeless issue itself, looking ahead to this year, I am very interested to see if the county and the city can do what some folks in both groups have said they would like to do, and that is talk to each other about homelessness and about homelessness policy. But when the city came out with its criminalization ordinance, as the critics called it, there were county officials, both elected and within county government, who said, this is a really bad idea. This is not good policy. And so that kind of seemed to throw a wrench in any kind of movement towards these folks getting along. But let's face it, Las Vegas I know it has a sign and everything, but that sign is not in Las Vegas. Most of the people in Southern Nevada are not in the city of Las Vegas. There are a lot more people anyway, that live in unincorporated Clark County. And so these kind of solutions have to be approached with partnership between the county and the city. And of course, that always runs up against turf wars, and you have elected officials with their sharp elbows, and that makes it difficult. But it's got to start happening. People say that, elected officials say that. In 2020, we'll see if any of it happens. It might be difficult just given the personalities that are on, frankly, both bodies.
Miranda, let's move out of city borders then, and let's look at something maybe a little bit bigger and look at all of Southern Nevada or statewide also. We're looking ahead at 2020. What are some of the more wide-reaching stories that you're looking at covering for our state?
Well, something I covered this year that I know is going to continue to come up is this a federal bill that's been proposed by Clark County to expand the boundaries that we can develop on. And it would be the biggest expansion of developable land in at least 10 years in Clark County. And it kind of speaks to, I guess, the future of what we want to be as a community. We're talking about affordability just earlier, and a lot of people who are in support of what this proposed bill would do say that we need more land so that we can continue to build more housing so that the supply remains high. But there's also criticisms about how this bill would shape Southern Nevada's future, just because some people say that it would create more sprawl, or that we don't have enough public transit and things like that to support people living so far out in the valley. Most of the growth would be along I-15 south. And then there's also an issue of climate, I think, relating to this bill as well, just because we know that Nevada's warming very rapidly. Reno and Las Vegas are both warming very rapidly. And in addition to climate change, one of the reasons that's happening has to do with how rapidly we've developed. And that's created an urban heat island, is what people call it. So would this push that further? So I'm going to be looking out for movement on that. I've heard that it could be introduced to Congress pretty soon. I know that the county's talking a lot with our congressional reps, so we'll see what happens.
And I understand that there's potential water issues related to this expansion too, that some of the concerns are that we could open the door to expand and include the water pipeline from other areas in East Nevada as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the pipeline, I think, has been on the table for a really long time, this project to basically pump water from rural Eastern Nevada to Las Vegas. I don't know if we're going to see any definitive answer on that this year. There is going to be some kind of there was a court case, basically. There were appeals relating to a previous court case about a month ago, and we're expecting to get an answer from the judge in that case probably early this year. But that's probably not going to be the end of it. So that judge might say that we need to go back to the drawing books and reconsider the applications for pumping water that the Water Authority put in for Eastern Nevada. But if that does happen, it's not going to be. It's probably going to be a few more years before we know what's going on with that.
And do we think this might get to the Nevada Supreme Court level before something is decided?
That's what I'm hearing. That's what both sides seem to be saying. But I mean, beyond just the pipeline, I do think as Clark County continues to grow, water issues in general are just going to continue to be more and more pressing. We know that we've been able to reduce our water consumption in general per capita pretty well over the past decade or so. But are we going to reach a limit on that as the population continues to grow like we're expecting it to? And if we can't do the pipeline, are there going to be any other options for increasing our water supply?
And Mick, let's talk a little bit more about something else that's more drilling underground, so to speak, that's also happening kind of on the outskirts of Las Vegas, is what's happening underneath the convention center right now with the new tunnel project. Can you tell us how that's developing and what you expect might be the big stories in 2020?
Yeah, so now they just started doing the actual digging there. They're doing an underground people mover system for the convention center expansion. $55 million project. It's supposed to be done by next year for CES, so we'll see how that goes. Have any issues with the boring? They said the softer ground isn't their issue. The soft ground is their issue. A lot of people wonder, well, if they hit like caliche or some kind of hard material. They said that's easier for them to go through than softer. So a lot of with the stadium, they had to do a lot of TNT and blowing up some caliche to get some of the structure in there. So if that rings true underneath there, they have no problem boring that tunnel there. And then, if that proves successful, there's plans that they want to expand that through the resort corridor to the airport downtown and the stadium, which would be a pretty big people mover for a mass transit system for Las Vegas. They have the monorail, but that hasn't really taken off as they expected. They're adding a stop with the Venetian and the Sands area with the MSG Sphere coming online here. And they're looking to do one for the stadium, but they can't get that funding in place, which has been a problem with the whole system anyways, just financials. So it'd be interesting to see how that also goes, just above ground and below ground transportation there.
And a key point you made there, and this extends maybe beyond 2020, is in 2021, when this is supposed to be completed, CES, the biggest conference that we have here in Las Vegas, would probably be its testing run for something like this. That's amazing. I'm sure that's a story you're excited to cover as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about elections then. Upcoming elections. Hugh, what are you really looking at? What's kind of the big story you're focusing on? Is it caucus? Is it the election itself? Is it what's going on in maybe some of the congressional races?
I think that 2020 is going to be the ugliest political year of any of our lifetimes, and it's going to be hard to watch. And maybe harder not to watch, because it's going to be a spectacle. And of course, most of that has to do with because Trump is up for re-election. And that is going to be the issue in race after race throughout the country, up and down the ballot. I contend that it actually was the issue and the reason that Democrats won in 2018. It was not because of the strength of Democratic candidates, but because the weakness or dislike of Donald Trump. But that's where we're headed in 2020. And so locally, of course, in 2020, Nevada, I suspect, will probably remain blue. I suspect that Nevada will go for the Democratic nominee, whoever it is. Other than that, the governor is not up this year. There are no U.S. Senate races up. So really the most high-profile competitive race probably in the state this year will be Susie Lee's re-election bid in the 3rd Congressional District. She is already taking a lot of heat, of course, because she voted for impeachment. Mm-hmm. And now she won that race. She won that district. And I was surprised, actually, when I went back and looked at this the other day. She won it by 9 points in 2018. I was under the impression that the margin had not been that large, but it was pretty big. And that district is changing. It used to be that you couldn't win it in a midterm. It had to be a presidential year for when you get that Democratic turnout for a Democrat to win it. Susie Lee was the first person to win it in a midterm. This time there will be more Democratic turnout because it's a presidential election year, so maybe she is not as vulnerable as Republicans would like to think, but that's probably going to be the most high-profile race of the year. But that race, the presidential race, obviously, are going to be very unnerving, and put the children in the other room. You don't want them watching television. It's going to be hard to watch.
And Ed, to Hugh's point, what kind of activity might we see campaign-wise here in our state? Do you foresee we're going to see a lot of presidential campaigning going on here in Nevada, and a lot of presence of President Trump here campaigning?
I think so. There's a building here with his name on it. A lot of his friends are here. Trump, if you look at the clips, if you look at the historical context, he has done business with people in gaming for forever. I think that we're going to see him here. I think one of the interesting things to note is early voting. We talked about whether or not we're going to see an uptick in that. In 2018, I remember there was 4 times as many early votes in Nevada as there were in the previous midterm. I foresee people coming out for this election. I agree with Hugh. I think it will be ugly. And when Trump comes to town, I think it'll be particularly ugly. I mean, think about who's here waiting for him. You got the Culinary Union. So that is a showdown I expect to unfold in, spectacular fashion.
So we've got a minute left. I want to go around the table and just maybe sum up what you think 2020 is going to be in maybe one word. Hugh, let's start with you.
Hard to watch. Sorry, 3 words.
Ed?
Explosive.
Mick?
Expansive.
Miranda?
I don't know, controversial?
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Now, if you at home would like to learn more about any of the topics that we've covered today, please check out our website at vegaspbs.org/Nevada-week. You can also find us on social media at Nevada Week.